even more Scottish Pokemon. Welcome back to the Croneo region, my Fakemon region based on Scotland. So let's get into it. Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. Mono-electric frog-inspired line. Before you think I copied the wonderful Bellibolt, just know I came up with this idea before even Legends Arceus came out. Also, I think you'll agree this idea is unique. Meet Tadsol, a solar-powered tadpole, Turbit, a wind-powered frog, and Hydroad, a still mono-electric toad powered by hydropower. Yeah, it's not water type. The word hydro in its name comes from hydroelectricity. It is not a water elemental. Its electric powers are just boosted by water, which is what its signature ability, hydropower, does. It made sense to complete the trio after all. And yes, wind power was introduced in Gen 9, but I was going to make an ability named wind power anyways, so I just decided to use it. As you can see, we have a renewable energy theme. All too often, the nature preservation theme in Pokemon has been depressing. I'm not against guilt-tripping people to be green-minded by corrupting every Pokemon you may or may not hold dear, but I wanted a more inspirational one just to change it up a bit. A lot of the renewable power from Scotland is mostly from wind, to be fair, but a lot of that wind comes from offshore, especially in the northeast. These double as hydropower generators, hence why Hydroad still has some wind power stuff. So why frogs? I just thought it'd make the design interesting and cute. We also do get plenty of frogs here, so anything frog related would work in my opinion. Something I realised a little too late is the lack of ground, bug and psychic types. Although I feel I've done enough with the former two, I still do not have enough non-legendary psychic types. So let's fix that with two single-stage designs. First of all, we have Psymon, a psychic salmon. This was directly inspired by the salmon ladder at Pitlochry in Scotland. Pitlochry has a big dam. Not massive, but big enough to disrupt local wildlife. So they made a ladder, which is more like a staircase, which allows some water and the wildlife to go downstream, and the salmon in mating season to go upstream. During this mating season, you can see salmon leap from the water up the ladder. To me, I felt like water was uninspired, and I had way too many water types in Croneo already, and flying just didn't feel right. Psychic was the next logical choice, not just for balancing reasons, but also because of the mental determination that must go on while going upstream. And I felt it'd be interesting to interpret the jumping as telekinetic. It's also orange because it's a salmon. And now we have Ottrick, coming from otter and trick, like a magic trick, because this otter is magical, similar to how Alakazam is, hence the psychic type. Plus, fairy or dragon didn't feel right. But why do any of this? Well, otters are one of Scotland's most iconic animals, so this was a must for me. In lieu of any intuitive ways to go about this, the first place I looked was Japanese mythology, and I found that otters were shapeshifters in said mythology. Changelings are also very common in Scottish mythology, and Croneo has a few mon based on them already, so I think this fits in with this lineage. There's also the Celtic myth, which includes Scotland, but also places like Ireland as well, of otter kings who lead an army of 7 black otters. If they are captured, they can grant any wish in exchange for their freedom, hence the magical theme and royal aesthetic, as well as the black skin. Also, both of their shinies switch colour schemes, since pink, the colour that happened to be used for Ottrick's magic, is also commonly associated with salmon, and the Otter King in Irish folklore is sometimes described as having white fur, black ears, and orange feet, so it just made sense to swap their colours. Plus, they can be seen as sort of a duo anyways, mono-psychic creatures that are somewhat aquatic. Time for Sodjinn, a steel water type based on Irn Bru, a very popular fizzy drink in Scotland. Since most of my viewers are American, when I say fizzy drink, I mean soda, hence the name. It's so popular that its slogan is Scotland's other national drink, since whiskey is #1. Its pressurized form is just a can of Irn Bru, but its depressurized form is a strongman? Yeah, the gin part of Sodjinn's name comes from the genie in a bottle aesthetic, which worked to actually turn the liquid itself into a Pokemon while also incorporating the can itself. But this genie is a strongman because it's also based on the figure on the Irn Bru logo, who was originally supposed to be Donald Dinny, the strongman from Aberdeenshire, said to be the 19th century's best athlete. His likeness was used after he endorsed the drink, and the strongman aesthetic has been associated with the brand ever since. I also personally love the arm-like bubbles in the pressurized form, and the weights that the depressurized form is holding are more like Irn Bru cans. Its ability is similar to that of, say, Aegislash, Mimikyu, or even Palafin. This time it's called Depressurize. How it works is that you always start the battle with the pressurized form. After taking any damage which results in its health being under 50%, Sodjinn would transform into its depressurized form. It will remain in this form until it faints or the battle ends. So you can have a full HP depressurized Sodjinn if you heal, but you just can't enter with one. If it does faint and you revive it, it will enter with its pressurized form, which resets everything. Also, if it enters the battle with less than 50% HP, it is still in its pressurized form, and then assuming no healing has taken place, it is in its pressurized form until it takes damage. As for the type, if you haven't guessed already, it's a pun on the name Irn Bru, since steel is the iron subbin, since the brand is associated with said metal, more than just through its name, and water as the brew subbin, since it's a kind of drink, made from liquid, mostly water. Before we get back into discussing some Scottish themed Pokemon, why not leave a like and subscribe to my channel? When you do, ring that notification bell to be informed whenever I upload. Less than 1 in 5 of you are subscribed at the time of writing. While you're down there, check out the Croneo region Instagram to check out the stats, shinies, and dex entries for all the Pokemon in the Croneo region. You can also join my Discord server, speak with fans of Croneo such as yourself. Finally, if you want to go the extra mile and help keep my Fakemon videos going for longer, why not subscribe to my Patreon or become a YouTube member today? It'll help me pay for the talented artists that make this possible, and in return you get to see some of my Fakemon early, and maybe even some videos early. It's completely optional, but would be greatly appreciated. Let's get back onto the video. Now time for 3 more single stage Pokemon, which share something very niche in common. This first one is called Bhillie, based on the Ghillie Dhu, which is a fairy creature in Scottish mythology renowned for its kindness. Finally, a benevolent Scottish myth! It is depicted as a black-haired man wearing a leafy cloak, and what inspired the name for a ghillie suit, the sort of leafy cloak military people wear. The artist also seemed to give it a leafy kilt, and some flowers to convey its fairy grass typing. It is a goat, a male one to be exact, so a Bhillie goat, hence the name. But why is it a goat? Simple, some of my friends gave me the idea to make it a counterpart to my other Anthro-Goatmon, this time the female-only Caprine. I liked the idea, so I just went with it. Moving on, I have a story about Volkan here. It doesn't really have anything to do with Scotland or even Canada, but it was one of the first Fakemon I ever made. I do remember trying to make starters when I was about 9 or 10, but Volkan was the earliest I could actually find the record of me making. Plus, the starters I made weren't even animals, so I doubt I'd use them. I just thought a silly, goofy little can with lava in it would be funny. I even showed off the original art for April Fools. It's Steel Fire type, by the way. The final one is the Poison Water type Selachimer. The name comes from Selation, which is a group of fish that sharks are a part of, as well as polymer, a substance with big molecules. One of these substances is plastic, of which Selachimer is made from. Plastic pollution in the ocean is kinda killing ecosystems, so I decided to make a Pokemon that would reflect this and continue the trend of green political allegories that Pokemon does. Sharks and plastic seemed like a natural pairing to me, due to the fact sharks haven't evolved much over the millennia, as well as having long lifespans, which kinda reminded me of how plastic isn't really biodegradable and lingers for up to a century or longer. An example of a long-living shark is the Greenland shark, which can live for over 300 years. Is also found around Scottish waters, as is the basking shark, which just leaves its jaw wide open so it can eat those yummy little sea planktons. Selachimer is like that too. Its wide open jaw is shaped like a bottle cap, but also it eats microplastics in the ocean instead of plankton. Yeah, plastic pollution in the oceans isn't just the old plastic bag and 6-pack beer holders, but tiny little particles as well, that manufacturers put in many products for I don't know what reason. They just end up rinsed down the drain and into the ocean, harming wildlife that consumes it. It's also not good for us humans to ingest, but we're a bit bigger so we can take it a bit more. So Selachimer is actually doing the Pokemon world a service which would be much appreciated in the real world. Its jaw isn't the only thing based on actual plastic material. Its main body is a plastic bag, seemingly of the same brand that my bug-type gym leader, Ant, wears the shorts of, but I'm sure there'd be other brands too. The handles from this plastic bag form the tail, and the fins are also plastic knives. We did try other cutlery too, but knives seem to work the best. If you haven't noticed, I've just talked about a fairy grass type, a steel fire type, and a poison water type. This mirrors the typings of the final evolutions of my premium starter trio. I do have 2 starter trios. Check out the Croneo series playlist to find out why. Was this intentional? Kinda. I knew I wanted to do a Ghillie-Doo which kind of needed to be fairy grass type, but then I realized I could make them a sort of loose trio like Jinx, Electabuzz, and Magmar. I came up with the other ideas pretty quickly, even if I later decided that Bhillie would be better to be connected to Caprine. So I didn't quite know where to put this one, so I'm gonna say it here. Meet Sealipup, Herdeal, and Stoutsea, mono water type Pokemon. Much like how researchers in Paldea concluded that Wiglet is not the same Pokemon as Diglett, the Stoutsea line is not the same Pokemon as the Stoutland line. Why did I feel like adding a new Sealmon when we already have the likes of Seal and Sfeel? Well, there's a sizable population of harbour seals and grey seals in Scotland. They're common enough to consider an inclusion of a new line, so why did I decide it to make it a Convergent and not something brand new or a regional variant? Well, funnily enough, I nearly did make it a regional variant of the Lillipup line, until Scarlet and Violet introduced the idea of convergent species. The main reason I decided to make it a convergent Pokemon is due to this line's inspiration. Sure, Sealipup is a seal pup, which is where the connection originally stemmed from, and Herdeal is an adult seal, but Stoutsea is meant to be my interpretation of a Selkie, a myth that's Scottish in origin, about seal-like creatures with the power therianthropy, essentially the ability to turn from animal to man and vice versa. Most myths to do with them feature the females of the species pretending to be beautiful women in order to prey upon male humans. Along with replacing the word land for sea in Stoutsea's name, and also being a reference to seals just without the L, I think the name Stoutsea kinda sounds similar to Selkie. Maybe? Its appearance also makes it look like it's bursting out the seal skin. And why not have this seal creature turn into man's best friend instead of man itself? The reason why the Stoutland line was picked specifically was for 3 reasons. Firstly, to be completely honest, it's one of my favourite Pokemon. In my first playthrough of my first Pokemon game, Black, I overleveled the hell out of my Stoutland and barely even touched my superior. Second, admittedly the community at large doesn't share the same affection I have to this line, but I can see why since it's fairly plain and basic, and the concept could have done a bit more, although I personally think they're perfect the way they are, and feel like they need more love and attention. Of course I'd say that. It's my 3rd favourite Pokemon line of all time. Finally, this plainness provided a blank enough slate to work on. I feel the shape and design details which are there can be utilised into something new, unlike something like Seal, which hopefully I would tackle one day, but I have no plans to for Croneo. On the whole, I'm extremely happy with how they turned out. Finally, people don't like Objectmon for some reason. Despite many interesting concepts emerging, people aren't a fan of just sticking eyes onto something where there were none. So I just stuck some eyes on a jewellery box, called it Boxterity, coming from box and austerity. Mono steel type. You can see what I'm trying to do when it evolves into Indypendant, basically a pun on the word independent and pendant. It is free from the box and is happy. This is meant to be symbolic of Scotland's historic fight for independence. You may know the current independence movement, which wasn't popular enough come the 2014 vote, but has had some momentum post-Brexit. Regardless of what it's like now, this fight has been historic. There were wars centuries ago before the UK was even formed, because England loves to claim what isn't theirs. By the way, that's not an attack on my English viewers, just a dig at your country's historic and recent behaviour, particularly in regards to Scotland. I don't want this design to necessarily take a side on the modern debate, more to represent all the movements and their motivations behind said movements. The animosity I see in resistance to the Scottish independence movement inspired the sort of Shedinja-like byproduct of the evolution called Boxit, since the box remaining is bitter at the evolution and finally wants to reunite with Indypendant. I guess you could say the Pokemon wants to Boxit, as in put Indypendant in the box. It is also the box. It also kind of sounds like Brexit and the hypocrisy of the unionist movement. If you don't agree that all art is political, which for the record most art is, you have to concede that all art is at least biased. But I will say, if you are staunchly against the Scottish independence movement, you can still use Boxterity, since all three of these mon have a base stat total of 500. And not only is Boxterity the more defensive one, it also happens to make use of the Eviolite, so is way more viable if you want something more defensive. So even if you think I made the design concept way more pro-independence, practically, it at least appeases the unionist side of the debate. So that's it for general Pokemon that are predominantly Scottish. I have now shown off every non-legendary Pokemon in the Croneo decks. Comment below what you've liked so far and keep watching for a Halloween special and some videos about other aspects of the Croneo region I've not shown off thus far. Also, why not check out the Croneo playlist as well? Binge watch the whole series. Why not get a grasp of what you think your team will be? Anyways, wherever you see me next, I'll see you there. Cheerio!